afternoon, everybody. I'm Jacob Friedman. He's Evan Budrovich. The USC Trojan football team travels to Hawaii. For one half, it looks like they almost might be leaving the Randall Isle with a loss, but they managed to make it out 30-13. But I want to focus on this week, where USC travels home to take on the Washington State Cougars in the Pac-12 as well as home opener. Evan, your thoughts about what we should expect from this Cougar team?
Well, first and foremost, Jacob, this is a team that struggles against the run. Last week allowing close to 300 yards on the ground. They're also a turnover-prone team. Their quarterback, Connor Halliday, not afraid to let it fly with the football. And this USC defense, as we remember, folks, great at intercepting the ball, doing an excellent job last week against Hawaii with those 4 picks, including one return for a score. So, expect the big play kind of from the USC defense once again from this Cougar club coming in this week.
Yeah. Washington State, Connor Halliday, he had a pretty good report last week with wide receiver Gabe Marks, and a Los Angeles native himself, caught 9 balls for 81 yards. So you do worry about that. Connor Halliday, while he is very error-prone, and USC picked off Hawaii's Taylor Graham 4 times last week, that he will air out the ball, and that at some point one of those deep lobs could end up in a touchdown or two. That wasn't really necessary. That happened at the end of last week's game against Hawaii, where Graham launched up a pass in the last 30 seconds of the game and made the game from a 30-5 real blood to a 30-13. Looks a little bit closer than it was game. It also ruined the spread as well. So a lot of people in Vegas going crazy.
Besides the Vegas odds here, we have to focus on the fact that the cornerback position has been one of questions and a little bit of a weakness coming in for this team. You mentioned the fact that Kevon Seymour came out of the game injured. Also, Anthony Brown with a little limp. He came back into the game later in that contest. So those are your 2 top guys right now who aren't at full strength. You bring in guys like Torrin Harris, who has improved. I mean, we could both say Torrin has definitely stepped up this fall. But it's still a position where you're going to have to trust on a lot of guys because Washington State's going to spread out the ball, and we know Mike Leach, the guru, is going to test you in any way possible out from the edge.
Well, the advantage for USC is, like it has been last week and like it will be all season, is the front 7. I was actually on a conference call a little bit earlier. Washington State offensive lineman Elliot Bosch mentioned that the front 7, they're big, they're tough. He actually sounded a little bit scared of this front 7 with Devon Kennard and hopefully Morgan Breslin, if he returns from an injury on the outside, could make life very difficult for Connor Halliday in the backfield to just hit him, make him have to scramble, make a lot of the inaccurate throws that he's been prone to do. So if USC is going to really want to limit Washington State, the front 7 is key, especially considering Washington State struggles in the running game.
Jacob, absolutely right. And the best way to do that is to get a lead early. When you get ahead of a team and are able to get your outside linebackers to rush with a full head of steam towards the quarterback, it only smells doom for the opposing offense. And in the Coliseum, obviously the home opener, you expect that they'll be close to 80,000, 90,000. You never know for sure, depending on how the crowd feels. And that's always an interesting topic here at USC, Jacob, how the fans react to the team on the field. But this USC club, you get them an early lead, they should be able to rush the quarterback and make things difficult for Halliday.
But the question right now, Evan, is who's going to be the team who's going to be the quarterback to give USC that early lead? Cody Kessler and Max Wittick, as we expected, they split halves last time. Kessler passed for 95 yards, Wittick for 77. Both completed about half of their passes. Not exactly a great start for either quarterback. And Lane Kiffin said he's actually decided a starting quarterback for next Saturday. But when are we going to find out that starting quarterback? Of course, next Saturday.
Yeah, sometimes the best-kept secrets are the ones with the greatest rewards, and I actually just made that up myself. But I think that possibly you're going to see, it's going to come down to, however it works in practice, and we've seen it all fall camp long. Guys have been splitting reps. The offense is working with both guys. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a change. Then again, I also wouldn't be surprised if Kessler's out there to start the game as well. At this point, you have to expect the offense to hopefully tailor itself around both these guys and find niches that are allowed to, because let's face it, last week's passing attack was mediocre at best. There were no deep routes. Guys weren't making catches, and it was so tough to see as a fan and as a member of the media right now, just not seeing any type of diversity in the offense in terms of the passing game.
No, absolutely. But the one thing that did bail the Trojans out, they were actually trailing by 2 points midway through the second quarter, was the running game, led by the 2-headed monster of Justin Davis and Trey Madden, who started the game and had over 100 rushing yards. Silas Redd, we still don't know what happened. He had James Andrews, yes, that James Andrews, the notorious Southern doctor that has performed a lot of surgeries on a lot of athletes you've heard of. He had his knee looked at this last week, so you don't know what his status is going to be. I personally don't expect him back. for Washington State. But you had Davis running through the tackles, bulldozing his way through the tackles, really, and Trey Madden with his just deceptive moves and his speed, so that the running game, besides the front seven, looks like the best unit that USC has right now.
You know, Jacob, it's interesting because USC does have a big offensive line. Although it's a little young on the left side with Turk and Wheeler, it's a very large and intimidating line. You're facing a Washington State team, as we mentioned. They just got bowled around by Auburn, who, although they are in a down year the last couple of years, once Cam Newton left that team, they're still a very good running team at Auburn. And if USC has a similar-sized offensive line, they could push around this Cougar defense and pound the ball up the middle, just like you mentioned.
Oh, absolutely, and they're going to need to do that with the quarterback indecision as well as the offensive line showed a lot better ability to run block than pass block last time. Chad Wheeler, as you mentioned, the freshman redshirt freshman starting left tackle, had a little bit of issues just covering the blind side. He looked like a freshman quite a bit. But you also worry a little bit at right guard. It's been a little bit of a circus ride, just guys flying in and out there. The expected starter going into camp was John Martinez, who had started at the position for 2 years, but then Andre Walker was moved from left tackle over to right guard, and then both guys got hurt at some point in last week's game. So 6-year former center, now right guard apparently, Abe Markowitz, Hawaii native, got to play in front of the home fans. And so the offensive line, there's a lot of talent, a lot of size, but they're going to have their sort of piecemeal approach right now work out if they're going to be able to hold off the Cougars, who are a little bit undersized, still are a lot feistier than the 3-9 Washington State team we saw last year.
Yeah, Jacob, and you mentioned the fact that this line has some struggles in pass protection, and I think this is an argument we have to throw out there just for the sake of doing it. A lot of these short passes we saw last week against Hawaii maybe were called for a reason. When you have a line that is struggling to get your cohesion together in terms of pass protection, the best way to simplify the game, quick 3-step drops, get the ball out of your hands, and knock these defensive linemen down so they can't jump and block the pass. So maybe as the season progresses, we'll see more confidence in the passing game, which will allow for deeper routes and expanding the passing tree, or else you're just going to have to dump it short and not allow certain things like that because the ball will get knocked down.
And on the topic of dumping the ball off short, we're going to do a quick recap of last week's 30-13 win over Hawaii, where USC fans, from what I could tell last year, just were constantly infuriated. Coach Kiffin's constant calls of bubble screens. And
stuck in the trees, so to speak, here in this outside vicinity for our next segment of the scene. And basically what was going on, our offensive line did show some signs of youth. We talked about the 2 young guys on the left side a little bit. And then in terms of the passing game, a lot of short passes because you couldn't throw it deep. And when you had those opportunities, a couple of drop passes here and there made it difficult to convert on those big plays. And next thing you know, you lose confidence in your deep game because guys weren't making the big receptions when given the opportunity.
No, absolutely. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we kicked Evan outside. But what I did like is what we did see from the middle of the field as well as the safeties. Suat Cravens in his first college game had an interception. Josh Shaw took an interception, a pick 6 to the yard, and actually he changed his number today, 2-6. Coincidence? I think not, coming right after the pick 6 against Hawaii. And we saw a lot of what we really like to see from Deion Bailey, as well as Gerald Bowman and some of the other safeties back there. So that position is set, which is going to be much needed from that position to have good play because the cornerbacks have been so weak. And 2 other good performances did come from Lamar Dawson as well as one of the team captains on the defense, Hayes Pollard. You worried a little bit with the 5-2 that those 2 would have to be alone in the middle of the field, in the middle of the backfield, trying to get tackles. But for the most part, there wasn't a lot of open space for Hawaii defenders to get by once they got past the original defensive line.
And absolutely, and it's all thanks to the pressure coming from the outside. You look at Jabari Ruffin and Devon Kennard on the outside doing a great job getting past the tackles, making life difficult for Graham. So the next thing you know, he couldn't even go through his progression. It basically was just heave the ball up, and then the safeties could go after and make big plays. So, Jacob, I guess my question for you is, looking back from last game, what was something that was a little discouraging from the defense? Obviously, we did a great job limiting Hawaii's attack. But was there anything that kind of stood out to you that might translate against a pass-heavy Washington State club this week?
Well, I think something that went a little bit under the radar because USC was playing an inferior opponent last year was the absence of Morgan Breslin. Morgan Breslin, he had 13 sacks last year, and against Hawaii, the USC defensive line had a little bit of an easier time than I expected him to have against Bosch, as well as a strong offensive line. They're very hard-nosed. A lot of the Washington State offensive line, they weren't five-star recruits out of high school, but they are just loving this chance. They haven't played USC since 2010. It was a blowout last time, and so they would love nothing to just shut down the vaunted 5-2. And I think that Breslin needs to be present because he's going to become big. He really is going to have to get in under Halliday's skin if USC is going to not want Halliday to have to beat the deep.
And right, Jacob, that team depends on one man. Meanwhile, for the Trojans, we mentioned the fact that it's a two-quarterback system here and there. But let's just focus on the fact that this offense is one of the better offenses, going in the Pac-12 right now. So we're going to take a quick segment into the Pac-12 for a second. And Jacob, we saw Oregon State go down. We saw Oregon put up 66 in the blink of an eye. What's kind of stood out to you over the course of the weekend from the Pac-12?
Well, I would definitely have to say it would be the Oregon State loss to Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington made the Eastern Conference the semifinals of the football championship subdivision last year, and so they are a very respectable squad. But to be a top 25 team and allow a team that you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to come into your home stadium and give you a loss and presumably knock you out of the top 25 for a while is a little bit embarrassing. Eastern Washington's Vernon Adams was great. He looked like he was the second coming to Braxton Miller out there at Reser Stadium, but for right now, that was the thing that surprised me the most, even though we shouldn't be shocked considering the talent level on that Eastern Washington squad.
Yeah, Jacob, but there comes a point, and you saw a lot of FCS teams pull off upsets this week, and I think what impressed me the most was the fact that UCLA came out firing on offense. A little slow in the first quarter, but once Hundley got his feet rolling, this guy, Jordan James, actually, he's going to be a big running back to replace Jonathan Franklin, so I think they have a good punch there. You have Shaq Evans on the outside, who wasn't utilized that well because of the presence of Fourier at the tight end, but now with Evans getting some more reps on the outside, this UCLA Bruins team is going to be impressive offensively and can compete with anybody in the conference moving forward.
And a quick dive into some non-revenue sports that we have going on this week. USC Water Polo, of the 5 straight championships, they're actually starting their season this weekend at the Triton Invitational. They're playing 6 games, and the 2 notable games that they're playing are against Cal and UCLA, who are going to be 2 of the top 5 teams in the country, along with the Trojans. But those are actually practices, which means they're not going to count in the standings, which means most likely you're going to see a lot of the second and third string guys, because if I'm Jovan Babic or the coach of either of those teams, I don't want to play my first team guys and give the other teams any clue about what they're going to expect late in their season. Evan, what sort of sports do you see going on the non-revenue side for the women?
Well, meanwhile, you have women's soccer dominating the pitch right now. Undefeated mark. They got a couple games coming up this upcoming weekend. The last time, folks, that USC women's team started 3-0, they won the national championship. So it's one of those things where keep the momentum rolling. You never know what can happen with this club. And women's golf, the defending national champion, who just blew out the entire field just last May. They're starting up in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend. So Annie Park, Sofia Povov, those type of players, keep an eye on them throughout the season. They'll be very exciting as well. And for all of us here, outside and indoors, Arrogant Student Nation, we are signing off for the week. Beat the Cougs, and we'll see you next time.